Pittsburgh is unique. Connecting its 90 neighborhoods are sets of steps like these. Or these. I took a stroll with Laura Zurowski. She's known as mis.steps online, a writer and photographer in Pittsburgh who's been documenting the Pittsburgh City Steps for the last 7 years.
So City Steps are a really unique form of municipal infrastructure here in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh, to start off, Pittsburgh is one of the hilliest urban areas in the United States. A lot of times people say, oh, that's San Francisco. And I always like to say, well, San Francisco is a wealthier city and they have better PR than Pittsburgh, right? So Pittsburgh, historically, much like San Francisco, not to totally diss them, but, you know, we have all of the big changes in elevations from the high points to the low points. And because of when Pittsburgh was developing in population and in industry throughout the latter half of the 1800s, this was before cars existed, right? And so the city steps were built as a way to transport all of the workers, the hundreds of thousands of workers that lived up in the hills, to the mills, primarily the steel mills that lined the rivers here in Pittsburgh. So it was really the first form of mass transportation for the working class. Here we are right now. We're here entering the Gladstone Street city stairs that connect Greenfield to Hazelwood. And Hazelwood is one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city of Pittsburgh. And it actually has one of the oldest existing properties that as we walk around, you will get to see the John Woods house, which dates back to the 1700s. So throughout the later part of the 1800s, 1900s, Hazelwood was really a neighborhood that employed lots of steel workers. J&L, which is Jones and Laughlin Steel, had a large plant, a large mill that was down here in Hazelwood throughout the late 1800s, throughout the 1900s, and this is why the city steps were created here, to transport the people who lived throughout this area, which the height of Hazelwood's population, there were almost 14,000 people that lived in this neighborhood, compared to today where there's a little under 5,000. So when we look around the city stairs and we see all of this greenery, like often when people come to this neighborhood, they think, oh wow, it's kind of like living in a park. Like, it's really beautiful, it's very green. If you were to visit this neighborhood 100 years ago, travel back in time, most of this greenery was not here. In fact, if you look at the historical photos that were taken of this neighborhood back in the 1920s, 1930s, you will see that there was pretty much not a tree in sight. The greenery that we see now is a result of the depopulation that Pittsburgh has experienced in the last several decades. Wow. Well, let's talk about orphan houses a little bit. Orphan houses in Pittsburgh are actually houses that don't have immediate street access, that they are bound by the stairs. So these houses in back of us would have been, at the time that these houses were built in the early 1900s, they would have been considered orphan houses because they did not have immediate street access. Now, back in the early 1900s, as these houses were being built, the fact that they weren't right on a street was not a big deal because life was different then. And even though as we come into the 20th century, people start to have cars and whatnot, it was certainly not like it is today, where households have 2, 3 cars. Households have large furniture, gigantic refrigerators.
How do they get furniture?
All of this, right? So I like to remind people that 100 plus years ago, people were still like we are today. Like, people wanted things, right? They wanted to have nice furniture. They wanted to have a home. They wanted to have a comfortable home. These are all things that resonate with us today. It's just that getting those kinds of goods was not as easy as it is today. And so as a result of that, how a household, particularly a working class or an immigrant household, how it grew in its acquisitions and furniture was very different than what we experience today. It's important to notice that the stairs are essentially streets, and these are streets that are designed to transport workers from their homes down to where they work. Also transport children to school, to your house of worship, to where you did your shopping. The neighborhoods in Pittsburgh were essentially like little small cities onto themselves. So everything that people needed to run their day-to-day lives was pretty much found within their neighborhood, right? Once again, this is another way that life back in the early 20th century was very different from what we have today. However, one of the things that happens to orphan houses over time is that with Pittsburgh's depopulation, and also with our changing in society, right? People have cars now. They can live anywhere. They drive all over the place to go grocery shopping and go to school and whatnot. The orphan houses have really languished. So throughout many places in Pittsburgh, those are homes that have been abandoned and they've been demolished. However, there are some places where people have been able to save them and preserve them. And oftentimes they're in areas where people were able to come in, kind of like these houses here, and build an access road in back of them, so that they have an alleyway, they have an access, so that they have a place to put their cars. It's easier to get deliveries and to move things in and out. But still, it's a beautiful sight to see. And this is one location that if we were to travel back in time again, and if we were standing right here 100 years ago, yes, the houses might on the outside look a little different, but this view would be very similar. The only thing that's missing is all of the houses that would have been over here in this green space area. Yeah. So maintaining the city steps, that's like the $140,000, $100 million question, right? Because here in Pittsburgh, we have over 900 flights of city steps, and this is everywhere. They're throughout almost all of the 90 neighborhoods. Not all of the 90 neighborhoods, but close. Here in the East End in Hazelwood, where we are right now, this neighborhood has several dozen flights of city stairs. And when it comes to maintaining them, this is something that like community, particularly now, they're really starting to take it to heart, because Hazelwood is a neighborhood that suffered extreme depopulation after the collapse of the steel industry here. This neighborhood went from having like over 13,000 people that lived here to having under 5,000 people. So that you're talking about houses being demolished, people moving away, just overall blight, and just a lot of sadness here in the community. But in recent years, that's really been starting to change. And Mill 19, which you may be able to see down by the Monongahela River there, is really a part of what is bringing Hazelwood back to life and is really reinvigorating the community. So as people become more interested in living and working in Hazelwood, those people that have lived here in the neighborhood for a long time are really concerned about, like, okay, well, how are people going to get around? How can we care for the city steps that are there? And how can we make the city steps an interesting part of what is attractive to this neighborhood? And so caring for them becomes kind of a twofold process. The first is that it is getting the city involved with it, and saying, like, okay, how do we 311? We got to let our city council person know. We have to let our elected officials and our members of our neighborhood council know, we care about the city steps. We want to be able to walk around our neighborhood. We want to be able to walk with our kids, walk with our dogs, just get some exercise. And so that's really the first thing, is getting like government involvement through your elected officials and whatnot. But the second thing is also being a good resident yourself and saying, okay, well, what can I do? Like, how can I be an agent of change in my neighborhood? And maybe that's something like, hey, I go out and walk around and I pick up some litter. Or I go out and if I see things are getting a little overgrown, I take my choppers out and I'll chop them down. Right. And just walking around and getting to know the people in your neighborhood, people that have lived here a long time, people that have just moved here, people that are walking around on their lunch break because they work at the new office space that's down in Mill 19. All of these different things just kind of contribute to caring for the infrastructure, caring for the stairs, caring for the sidewalks and the streets, and all of the people that are living here. Well, another unique thing about Pittsburgh and the city steps is that the city has almost 300 streets that are legal streets that are flights of stairs. And Tullymet Street, which is where we are right now, we just came down a section of it and we're going to continue to go down the section over there, is one of those. It actually has a street sign.
So that is a street.
That is a street. And if you look on the maps, it is there. Now, in the early days of GPS, say like 10, 12 years ago, You'd have your Google Maps or your Waze. Well, Waze didn't exist back then, but Google Maps, that type of thing of like, oh, okay, where are my directions? How am I going? And Google and other mapping devices hadn't yet indicated that these were flights of city stairs. So you'd be motoring around in your car, and it's like, oh, I want to get down to Second Ave, and you'd be coming, here along Sylvan Street, and then it'd say like, hey, take a left onto Tullymet, and you say like, wait a minute, I can't do that because that's a flight of city stairs. Now, fortunately, Google and all of their mapping now incorporates here in Pittsburgh all of these many flights of city stairs that are in fact streets. So you will get different directions if you are in a car versus if you're walking or if you're biking. But that is a really unique aspect of Pittsburgh, is that we have hundreds of streets that are flights of city stairs. So it's only the pedestrians that are allowed on it. Here we are on Nansen Street in Hazelwood, and this street gives a really great example of how the earth abides. Because humans, we like to come in, we kind of think we're in control, we try to build all this stuff, but the fact is the terrain here is really unruly, and once the kind of construction and maintenance stops, the earth comes back. And here in Pittsburgh, we have a real issue with landslides. And that is for a couple of different reasons. One, hills and gravity. Everything that's a hill, gravity works to, at some point, make it flat. And because we're a four-season city, we get the rain, we get the snow, all of that. That also contributes to the erosion. The third thing that Pittsburgh has that contributes to erosion is not just what happens on the surface, but also what happens below the surface. And Pittsburgh's underground infrastructure, which is water and sewer, is also very old. And for those of you that are watching this that are from Pittsburgh, you know that water and sewer is always trying to catch up, to replace all of those, pipes that were put down over 100 years ago that in the last several decades have really been falling apart and leaking. So there's erosion that happens here on the hillsides that we don't even see. It's happening underneath the ground. And that, combined with a heavy rain, a lot of snowfall, can really contribute to a landslide situation. And here on Nansen Street, this was the site of a landslide several years back that resulted in the city closing off the streets. And then as less people come through here, the greenery comes back, and, the earth just starts to take it all over again.
So for newcomers who's never done City Steps before but want to check them out, where do they go? What's some good ones to start off on?
Okay, so if you're brand new to Pittsburgh and the City Steps, there are two neighborhoods that already have extensive maps that are available online. The first is the South Side Slopes over on the south side. If you go to the South Side Slopes Neighborhood Association website, they have maps from their step trek that they hold every year in October. You can download those maps, you can look at them on the phone, and you can walk all over the south side. That is a lot of fun. Great views and dozens of flights of city stairs. Another neighborhood that also has a designated walking trail for City Steps is Fineview over on the north side. There's the Fineview Fitness Challenge walk that is there. You can get information about that on the Fineview Neighborhood Association website. And then once you kind of do those, you start to get a little obsessed. It's really easy to just go onto the City of Pittsburgh's website. They have an entire website or web page that's devoted all to the city stairs, and you can find a map there that indicates where all 900 plus flights are located, and then you can just start going around the city and investigating different neighborhoods and walking around. We're lucky because Google Maps does have all of this information. So, all you got to do is like you're walking around, you just pull up your map and you can see where the city steps are, and then just, walk around, have fun, explore neighborhoods, talk to people. People here in Pittsburgh are friendly, and, it's just a really great way to get to know the city and get some exercise.
Oh, I heard that you have a book coming out.
Yes,
Please tell us about it, because there's so much information to be had on these city steps.
Excellent. Yes, very excited. We are working with the History Press. I have two collaborators, Matt Jacobs, who is a photographer, and Charlie Sukup, who is a historian and archivist for the city of Pittsburgh. The three of us have come together and we have written a book about the history of the city stairs, as well as dozens of city steps walking tours, interesting places to go do some urban exploration, kind of off the beaten path, places to go explore. And we are, fingers crossed, that should be coming out in May of 2024. And the working title is called Pittsburgh's Ups and Downs, Exploring History Through the City Stairs.
Oh, that sounds really exciting. So
yes.
People can use it almost like a guide, like a tourist guide, and like go find those places.
Absolutely. It's designed for people who, whether you live here in Pittsburgh, you're coming to visit Pittsburgh, and if you want to get out and walk around, there's really great, very clear directions on how to go and have a walking tour adventure. But the other thing that's really nice about it, particularly the technology that we have today, like Google Street View, is one that if you're someone that you can't go out and travel around stairs, or you don't live in Pittsburgh, you can still have the book. And if you're curious and you want to see, like, oh, what do these structures look like? What do these neighborhoods in Pittsburgh look like? You can follow the walking tour using Google Street View. Just plop your avatar down on the page, and you can just use Street View to take your own walking tour from anywhere in the world, as long as you have an internet connection.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for coming out on this walk. It was fun. Good exercise and a lot of fun. Thanks, Ellen.